Hello and welcome back to J&J News. This is episode given a number of 3916. That's how many days I have been at this. That's a long time. And Josh, welcome back. Good to see you.
Great to be back on the program with you. We got a lot to talk about. Lots of interesting things have been happening.
Absolutely. And I've kind of looking back on the shows that we've done, and they are evolving in a different way, and it's a little bit controversial and a little bit frustrating for some of our own audiences that are being forced to merge to watch what we're producing here. And people will say to me, look, Jason, I like the work that you do, but I prefer your interviews. I'm like, well, that's cool. And at the same time, I've spent many years doing news shows, and this show is kind of a little bit of both. But what I felt, and what some of my friends felt who watched back and were able to provide me with some feedback, they're suggesting that what we're producing is a bit more like a radio show. And that got me thinking that maybe what we need to do is put our show out on some of those podcast platforms, for example. And I know that there are people that have followed me that have said, you know what, I can only get you on audio due to bad internet, etc. So if anyone's got any feedback and they'd like to know what's going on, what we're trying to do is produce something that's bite-sized, that fits in, but also provides you with different information. We don't want to duplicate what you've already consumed out there in the marketplace. That's kind of boring. What we are trying to do is to provide you with a fresh perspective and different ideas. And I'll tell you what, today, Josh and I had our first genuine pre-production meeting before the show, and 5 times I brought things up and Josh shot them down until I got to the punchline.
Come on now.
Well, you kind of said, oh, no, I don't believe that, whatever, I want to focus on this. I'm like, that's cool. I said, but that's the point of what we're trying to do here, because we both come from the same side of the fence in terms of what we're seeing, but we are seeing things differently. And I tell you what, 4 eyes, or in this case 6 when you put us all together, is certainly better than 2. And that's where I'm going. So very quickly, before we get started, what I want to do is, look, there's always an Australian segment in the show, and there will be one today. I want to talk about the Liberal new leadership. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the perspectives from all the different factions, if you can say that, from the so-called freedom movement. I want to talk about immigration directly. I want to talk about overseas students, and I want to talk about the tradie shortfall, and something that no one is picking up on in the place. Now, I also know, I'm going to throw to you now, Josh, you tell me what you want to talk about in relation to the US, and that'll paint the picture for everyone, whether they want to stay or whether they want to go. But I'll tell you what, there's going to be no other show like this.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say this. I know from my side of the world here, my audience in particular, they love this show. They love the back and forth. They love the intellectual curiosity. They love the fact that we cover things that they're not hearing any other places. They love all the clips that you put in and all the different things that we talk about. So I want to commend you on not just on the production aspect of things, but more importantly on keeping things and keeping people in particular on their toes. And I think that that's why the people like the show and why it's going to continue to grow. As far as what we want to talk about today, I think the number one issue for the United States of America, sorry, Australia, I wish you guys had this as well. But actually, do you have voter ID, don't you? You have voter ID in Australia?
No, ours is a bit different, right? Okay. when we go to vote, we walk into a polling booth, and we don't have to show identification, but what we do have to do is identify ourselves by our name, which must be on the electoral roll. So you have to pre-register to be on you can't enroll on the day. That's a nonsense. You've got to do that well in advance. So your name is printed with your address that is your official address, technically on your driver's license, that is photo identification, and you do that. Now, what's interesting is that when I last voted, I walked into the polling booth, and because my name is a little bit different, I have to spell it every time. So this time I actually took my driver's license out and showed the lady, and she looked at it and she said, oh, thank you, and she found my name, and that was it. And what they do is they put a little black line next to your name, and apparently afterwards they then have to go through and somehow collate them to make sure that, one, you haven't voted twice, which I don't think they police, but really to work out who hasn't voted, and they get a $40 or a $50 fine. So that's a little bit different. But what you're going
like
through is...
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds like you guys need a SAVE Act as well then. Look, there's 72 countries around the world. Some of them have very bad human rights abuses, and they still have voter ID. So we are in a battle here in the United States of America. We are winning that battle. We finally got Susan Collins to flip to be that 50th vote. I'm hearing now today that we're more than likely going to have Fetterman, so we might not even need J.D. Vance to be that tiebreaker. We probably already have 51 votes. And now, what I want to tell the American audience in particular is to get on the phones and start contacting, in particular, Senator John Thune's office, as well as Senator, I think it was Bill Hagerty. So even though they have all on board, they're now saying, well, we haven't done this talking filibuster before. It's been a long time. We don't know if we have the time to do it. They're coming up with excuses. So we need to be hammering them and making sure that they bring this thing up right away. We've got to strike while the iron's hot. We've got to get this signed into law by President Trump immediately before we can focus on anything else. It is that important.
Well, John Fetterman, Democrat, has come out publicly for voter ID. So for him to not vote for this would become political game playing. But I'll tell you one thing, Fetterman, if anything, looks like he could flip to the Republicans tomorrow. He agrees with more stuff that Trump's doing than his own party are doing against Trump.
Yeah, and not only that, he is one of the most highest popularity-wise senators, believe it or not, in the United States. I mean, he's somewhere over 65% approval rating, and that's with the left hating him because he has taken much more of an independent streak. So I think what's happening is because he's so popular in Pennsylvania, if the Democrats try to challenge him in a primary, he'll either go independent or Republican almost immediately. And then they understand that. So I think they're going to back off on him as far as putting a primary challenge against him. Because even if they did, that person probably wouldn't win anyway because he's so popular, believe it or not, in Pennsylvania. So I think he kind of has them by the you-know-whats because they can't challenge him because he can say, okay, fine, I'll go independent or Republican if you try to put somebody up against me as a Democratic Party challenger.
It's really interesting because Dr. Oz didn't lose too badly to Fetterman back in the days.
He didn't lose at all. Dr. Oz, I think, won that race, and they stole it.
So let's just argue that. Like if Fetterman were to switch Republican, he picks up all of Dr. Oz's votes that technically wins anyway, plus he's going to pick up a large percentage of Democrats that cyclically follow him, either because they like Fetterman or they don't realise that he switched party because there is that level of ignorance in the electorate. So it's almost like you're right. He could pick up as much as 70% of the vote. But of course the Democrats might run against him and who knows? But very, very interesting.
He would win.
He'd have to win.
Mm-hmm.
He'd have to win.
Yeah,
at that
it's
point.
amazing. This is a guy who literally started a debate with "Good night, everybody." So that's what he started. One of the debates, and somehow that beat Dr. Oz, the distinguished doctor and television star. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. A guy in a sweatshirt, hoodie, somehow beating Dr. Oz. It doesn't make any sense.
Does he attend the Senate itself in the hoodie and shorts, or does he put a suit on?
Never. I think I've seen him maybe in a jacket suit one time. Other than that, he's literally in the Senate in a sweatshirt hoodie. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I don't believe it's professional, obviously. I mean, I do every show pretty much, in a blazer jacket. I've done that my entire career. Although the Rage of the Aquarius show, I am using a sweatshirt hoodie, mainly because the other host does it, and I kind of feel silly having my jacket on when he doesn't. So, but other than that, I mean, anytime I'm on television, anytime I'm doing any type of interview, I always try to dress right. And so you would think that somebody who's a U.S. Senator would understand that decorum and professionalism and attire are part of your image and your job. And so I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing, but hey, he's voting, sensible at least for the most part. So.
Well, it certainly is interesting, and the one thing that the podcast news has done through people like Dan Bongino is legitimised the T-shirt and the cooling down of fashion sense. At the same time, when Midnight Oil lead singer Peter Garrett joined Parliament, he kind of took off the tie. So even though he did wear it inside Parliament, when he was at official functions, he'd wear an open-neck shirt and blazer, a little bit different.
Yeah, I don't like wearing a tie myself.
Yeah, and that kind of backed that off. But certainly in terms of Sydney business wear, when I say Sydney, I mean from people from New South Wales. Having been someone who was working in the CBD, I used to watch that because, I used to wear a tie, and eventually we all got a bit frustrated. And kind of about the turn of the century was when the tie came off from sort of formal attire tyres. The 21st century, early 2000s, it was quite common to turn up at a business meeting without the tie.
I'm still living in Miami Vice days, my man. I'm still back in the '80s with the blazer opened and and the T-shirt underneath it. I just like that casual look because you can still look professional, but you can also feel more casual while you're doing it, and I think that's much better. So.
Well, realistically, the internet age and all of the tech gurus legitimised the T-shirt, the blazer, and it's flown from the you're right, from the Miami Vice period, etc. But it got into business suit attire, so that's just an interesting aside there. Josh, so you want to we're covering the SAVE Act. We've already sort of got into great detail there. We're also going to cover off on massive section on the Epstein files, but we're going to show you some very different stuff. Now, you're going to present some stuff, and I'm going to present some stuff, and we're going to give each other enough sort of rope, to quote Andrew Denton, in terms of what we're trying to do. Now, I know
hang ourselves like Jeffrey Epstein didn't do.
Correct. Look, you're going to say that my stuff's conspiratorial, and I think that it may well be, but at the same time, it's going to draw enough facts in to ask the appropriate questions. And then I think we're going to reach a conclusion that I don't think we have to say in advance of where we think or what we think might actually happen. Do you want to do that now and then we get on to the Aussie stuff later, or would you like me to cover some of the Aussie stuff first?
It's up to you. Whatever you want to do.
All right, well, I'll tell you what. Let me get into something. I think it's important with the Aussie stuff, and I'll get it out of the way very quickly for those that can't stay with us for the show, and I did promise Aussie stuff at the head. So we've now learned that the Liberal National Coalition, so the Liberal Party component, which is the dominant party of the coalition, which forms the true opposition in Australia, even though One Nation's vote may push them to become the true opposition, they've now changed leadership. So Susan Lee was the former leader. She lasted 9 months in the job, and she was resoundingly beaten in the spill that occurred last Friday. So Angus Taylor is the new leader of the party. And alongside her is the, some might argue that I think she is, the very attractive Jane Hume. Not that that's the qualification, but she's the senator from Victoria who's become the deputy. Whether that means that she will be effective or not, I don't know, but they do have this male-female combination. But Jane Hume is certainly on the side of the faction of Angus Taylor. It's not like they had to go with someone from the Susan Lee side of the moderates to then create this sort of right and moderate component. So these two are firmly aligned together. So that in itself is a positive. Also, what's interesting is that I shared a video that Carl Stefanovic of the Today Show on about $2 million a year has recently set up his own independent podcast, and his very first interview that he did was with Pauline Hanson, the leader of One Nation. Well, Carl shared a video last Friday, and he says, now that we have a new leader of the Liberals, I'm now heading up to Alice Springs to interview who I think is the most significant person in all of this is Jacinta Price, the Aboriginal or half Aboriginal lady who is the Senator for the Northern Territory, who I believe will be the next Prime Minister of the country if the Liberals are able to get there. But she's currently a Senator. She has to get into the lower house before that in order to do it. But I found it interesting, Josh, and this is my point, that Carl Stefanovic, true mainstreamer that he is, highest paid in the country, has gone independent for his own podcast and forking out of his own cash, no big deal, to go talk to Jacinta Price. So where I'm going is that my kind of thinking is similar to what Carl's thinking, and Carl is obviously seeing the writing on the wall, knowing that mainstream media is dying, and in this 5-year transition period, or 2 years, 10 years, whatever it is, he's investing in independent media and trying to go independent, and he's picked Jacinta Price, which is interesting. Anyway, regardless of all of that, the first thing that Angus Taylor has said is to address why they're going backwards, and it's clearly the number one issue is immigration.
Sure.
And so with immigration in our country, Susan Lee was playing the Labor light type of position. Angus Taylor has gone more with the idea of, we don't want people coming to this country unless they align with our values. Now, immediately those on the left do what they always do. Anyone who's anti-immigration, which is because it's all about mass immigration and big Australia, they brand them as racist. Well, I'm here to say right now, this idea of pro-immigration means anti-racist and anti-immigration means pro-racist, well, that blunt stick instrument is dead in the water. It has no more meaning at all right? So you can be anti-immigration, right, or slowing of immigration, and got nothing to do with racism. Now, that's the argument that Jacinta Price is taking. That's the argument that Angus Taylor is taking. That is the argument that Jane Hume is taking, of course. But there is now nuance in the argument, and this is my point. Here we go. Let's present you with actual information. Okay, first thing I'm going to show you is the total number of international students in Australia this year, January to October 2025. So last year, there were 833,000 international students in Australia. Now, that's university and school. All right. Now, I want to provide you with historical context. If you look at 2022, the year that Albanese was elected, it was 746,000. 716 in 21. In 2020, it was 879. Now, the numbers dropped off. The reason that they did, obviously, was COVID, because that would have dropped the numbers. So you saw it was 952, 872, 795.
Students.
It is a lot. But as you can see, back to 2012, it was 500,000. So what I'm trying to say here is that 2012 all the way up, from 2013 all the way up to 2022 was the Liberal coalition. So they had no problem increasing the number of international students. So therefore, Josh, it's not partisan. Both parties have gained advantage from international students. But for what reason? Now, the universities are making a fortune because they're charging a couple of $100,000 a degree. That is mega bucks. But what are they doing with that money? Are they putting it into other investments? Yes, they're building more properties on their campuses to house more people, and they're building high-tech stuff, and university education is getting better, but it's just getting more fancy because they're so wealthy. But they're not using that money to make education free for Australian-born students. They've still got to pay a HECS debt. So the government is allowing the universities to do all of this crazy stuff and make all this money, but there's no net advantage to Australia. So Labor and Liberal are as bad as each other. However, where's One Nation's policy on this, except for cutting immigration? I can't see one. Where's People First's party, Jared? I'll ask him at the next branch meeting, for example, what our party's policy is. But here's where I'm going. Look at this, Josh. This is from the housing industry of Australia. Australia's 83,000 tradie shortfall on International Tradespeople Day, 19 September 2025. Trade shortages loom as a major threat to reaching the housing accord target from the Labor Party to build 1.2 million homes by 2029, according to the HIA Executive Director Mike Herman. So
that's insane. So
thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, you've got all these students coming into to your country internationally, probably the majority of them from China and from other third world countries that don't really have Australia's best at heart, right? And so what ends up happening from there is they're taking your homes, which is going to make rents and mortgages and everything else go sky high. You're going to be shorted. And clearly now you have people that are not going into the trades. So these students are coming in. What are they getting into if they're not getting into the trades? They're probably getting into biotech. They're probably getting into government, which is even worse because now they run for government in your country. And the next thing you know, they win. And now they have more power and more control. So the One Nation Party, as far as I'm concerned, they need to be about two things: deportation and denaturalization. And if they run on that, they'll win.
You would think that that would be the case, right? Now, Australia has only got 27.2 million population, and of course, all immigration effectively feeds a political Ponzi scheme that creates GDP, right? It's all about, if you can increase your GDP, that justifies that you are not falling into recession. Now, Craig Kelly, former Liberal, UAP, and One Nation, now in the Libertarians, has gone through 4 political parties. He talked about a GDP per capita recession in this country fueled by immigration and, of course, the international students. So that's why governments like it. What it does is it covers up their crimes against the people. And when I say crimes, inverted commas, their shortcomings, because they are failing the economy by feeding it, by doing it. Now, if you bring in 883,000 students a year, that's a lot of people buying your food, it's a lot of people paying rent, it's a lot of people buying fuel and clothing and entertainment and all that type of stuff, but it's artificial. So what I'm saying is, based on this number, if you only took 10% of these students, 833, and there's your 83,000 there, 10% of those international students, if you just directed them into trades, you've covered your shortfall. But that's not how it works. Now, as a normal Australian, the reason, obviously, that people oppose immigration is because they're saying, I can't find a rental home, I can't afford to buy one, whichever my socioeconomic position is, whether I've got enough for a deposit and a serviceability income to be able to do it. Either way, I can't get in. So why are you feeding that? That is my point. So In New South Wales, we have countless numbers of universities and international schools. We have, as far as I'm aware, 2 trade colleges, one here in the Hunter where I live and one up at Port Macquarie. 2! That's all there is. And what they do is they take students from year 11 and year 12, they take them out of the normal school system, and they teach them the core basic subjects of maths and English, and then they do all their trade subjects, preparing them for an apprenticeship. So they are the premium apprenticeship candidates when they leave school at year 12, because Paul Keating, Labor Party Prime Minister back in the early 90s, was the one that got rid of leaving school at year 10 and moved them to year 12. So in lieu of going back to the system where we pull kids out at year 10 and put them straight into apprenticeships as children, the trade college is the perfect preparation tool to be able to bring it. So my argument is, Labor, Liberal, One Nation, People First, whoever else you are, we need to work out to build more trade colleges to identify those students who don't want to go to university, have no interest in doing so, and move them into these trade colleges quick smart. Now, I'm not saying get them abbreviated, like now in Australia you can do a barber course in a year instead of 4 to get people out there to fill the niches. I don't want a tradesman coming to my house that's done 12 months to be my electrician. I don't want that. But what I do want to do is know that we're building up to it. So in the meantime, what I am saying is, if you come from somewhere else in the world and you are a qualified tradesperson, that's the person that everyone should be targeting as the first 20,000 people a year that we need to bring in. Don't want to bring in 83,000 tradespeople from overseas. I don't want to do that. But I do think that we're allowed to bring in some amount of doing it before we meet this criteria. But all this fancy schmancy woke nonsense of bringing in this and reuniting families and all that stuff, that's irrelevant. That is not our problem.
Yeah,
that's just trying.
It's an invasion of Australia. It's an invasion of Western countries. It's an invasion of Europe. It's an invasion of Canada. It's an invasion of the United States. It's an invasion of New Zealand. All the Western countries, we are being invaded, okay? There's no other way to say it, okay? Immigration without assimilation, which most of them do not do, is an invasion. There's no other way to say it. And so all of these countries need to come together, and they need to have like an anti-immigration coalition, like a caucus almost, almost like Europe has the European Union. We need an anti-immigration union, and we need to have 30, 40, 50, 60 countries, combined into this one thing and say, look, this is how it's going to be. In our countries, we are no longer going to just open the floodgates and allow people to come into our country unvetted, unchecked, and certainly without anything to give and bring to the country to make it better, right? Cost versus value. If your cost is more than the value you bring, we don't want you. It's just that simple. And so I think that's a big part of it. And if you can coalesce around something like that, then I think you can do a lot politically in Australia. And again, that goes to all the Western countries out there. You're committing suicide. You are committing suicide, national suicide, by allowing these people into the country because they don't care about you. They don't want to be there as far as assimilating into your culture and, into your way of life. They want to bring their third world mentality and ideology into your countries that are more advanced and are more free. And they want to turn it into what they just left. And that's a sad reality, but it's a reality that has been happening, and the globalists are behind it, and they're the ones through Brussels and the European Union. That's why you don't have control over your immigration and your own borders, because you're part of this stupid union that should be smashed into a million zillion pieces, and you should be able to have autonomy over who comes into your countries. And so that's what we have here with President Trump in the United States of America. And I could only hope and pray that many Western nations get another version of a President Trump, or even somebody like in Argentina, the leader of Argentina, or even, Bukele in El Salvador. Those are the types of leaders that these countries need.
What I want to do, and what I think we've done here, is that you've provided an argument that One Nation supporters would wholeheartedly agree with. And what I'm doing is I'm providing a perspective, I guess, that Rennick and probably John Howard would say. John Howard, the former second longest serving Prime Minister, Liberal leader, when he said the problem with immigration is that it must serve the people of Australia first, which is technically what you just said. But here's my point. If you are from Nepal or Vietnam or China or India or wherever it is, and we're 83,000 short, and you're an 18-year-old kid and your parents can come over and you realise that you could become a qualified blue-collar worker in this country, and you could go and work in the mines and earn $150,000 a year by the time you're 25 years of age, and you can buy a home and pay it off and raise your kids, and goodness me, come and join my cricket team because I need more batsmen and bowlers, right? And you want to be an Australian, you are more than welcome. That is exactly the point of what our immigration policy is. Now, the only thing you're going to need to do to become a tradesperson in this country is this. One, you're going to want to get a mullet haircut, and two, you want to go and buy a four-door ute. Or if you can't afford it, you're going to go and want to buy a Holden Commodore that your grandfather owned, because that's what all the kids do. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Now, Josh, you're probably not going to qualify for the mullet haircut, but we'll take you anyway if you want to come and trade.
That. But here, I would say this. How about close down the international colleges and universities, open up more trade schools, and put more natural-born Australians in them, teach them the trades, and have them take the jobs instead of bringing them in from China, India, and elsewhere. That would be my focus.
And bang, 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 that's where we arrive right in the middle, because that's the whole point of the exercise. And I tell you what, if I had my time over again, knowing what I know now, I would have enrolled to become a tradesman in something very, very quickly, sweated it out for 4 or 5 years.
Charlie Kirk said college is a scam, and he was right.
Absolutely.
Think about it. You go to a trade school, you go for 6 months to 18 months, however long the program might be. You have a concentrated, skill set that you're learning, and you graduate from that. You don't have all this student debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt that once you graduate you still have hanging over you. You can go work for a company for a year or two as an apprentice, learn what you need to learn, and then in year 3 or 4, open up your own shop. And now you're creating more jobs. You're bringing more money into yourself. You can create more for yourself. You can start a family, get married, have kids, and you can grow the economy as well as the population native born. That's what needs to happen. President Trump here in America is starting to focus considerably more on trade schools, which is wonderful. We're running now a 250 anniversary program in which there's going to be students from every state. They're going to take, I think it's like a 4,000 question test. And whoever can get the most answers right, I think it's like you have 2 hours to do it or whatever, wins scholarships in the United States. And it's supposed to be a new thing that they're rolling out. But I started thinking to myself, well, okay, that's great for the students, but you know what? How about the politicians? How about the politicians have to take these 4,000 questions, okay, and see if they can pass it, right? I think that would be a lot better even than the students. But anyway, that's something that the Department of Education here in America is doing.
Well, no, it's another interesting development that is moving in the right direction. Now, I'm going to put something on the screen here that I'm going to say is a little bit too personal and a little bit unprofessional, but I'm going to put it up anyway because it's about the factioning that goes on in this country. So here we go. What you're going to see on the left is a post on X by a fellow called Dr. Russell McGregor. He writes, "Oh great, Angus Taylor is the new leader of the opposition in Australia. He's a Rhodes Scholar, which means he was assessed as a pure traitor." Huh? Most attend the elite Freemasonry Lodge in Oxford. They are trained in globalism and enforce extreme Zionism to enslave the West. All right, let me just say something. Dr. Russell McGregor, I wrote a comment on this right now on Emma McEwen's page on Facebook. Here's what I wrote. You can already read it. To be honest, Russell McGregor, who I know personally, has accused me of being a Freemason and control the position. He's never walked that back or apologised. I've attended mutual friends' birthday parties and he avoids me like the plague. There is no one less controlled or more excluded from any public or private institution or organisation than me. For a deregistered shrink, he was a psychiatrist. For sharing Q stuff on his socials or his professional website, I don't recall which, he's little too out there with a Zionist obsession. He may be on the money with the Rhodes Scholar slur, but Angus Taylor will not be the next PM. It is a process, as we all know, but immigration is now going to move away from the pro-racism to anti-racism to at last be more nuanced. I'll explain this in my latest show due out today. Well, that's what I have done, and that is my point. And to Dr. Russell McGregor, why are you scared of me, mate? I don't understand it. You seem to know everything, and you're all obsessed with the Zionist thing, and the conspiracy stuff is a little bit too much out there. And what have you done to run for office or help any of us out but sit there in there and carry on like that? I don't find it productive at all. There you go, Russell, a public little slinging match, and you can go and abuse me if you want, but no one sees it anyway, so who cares? So, moving on now. Let's talk about... We talked about the Board of Peace that potentially could replace the United Nations. Well, Promethean Action, Susan Kinder, has published today information that suggests that Donald Trump is looking to replace the G7 with a new group called the Core 5. So what I've done is I've created a chart to compare GDP and population. Josh, have a look at this. This is the old G7 there on the left. The G7, that's the annual GDP latest figures from the participating countries, Canada, Germany, France, UK, Japan, USA and Italy, totaling $52.3 trillion with a population of 789 million. The new Core 5 is to compose China, Russia, USA, India and Japan, whose GDP already reaches 62 trillion, which means it's a good 20% larger than the old G7. But the population, would you believe it, is almost half the planet. That is something else. But that's telling you a couple of things it's telling me. One, he's excluding Europe, and he's including the new power bases, but he wouldn't be including Russia, China and India if he wasn't also working to have them remove their deep states within to get to what he's trying to do, which is to create wealth around the planet. Now, I know you're not a fan of China, but if I planted the seed that even Xi Jinping, he's constantly sacking different people, and the other day there was again another one of these coups d'etats that has kind of been rumoured to be extinguished. Could it be possible that China has potentially a dark side and a light side that Trump's aware of that we might not be?
Well, they certainly have a dark side. There's no question about that. There's been a story that just broke the other day. I didn't even get a chance to cover it yet as a segment on my show, which I still plan on, I might actually do, but I'll give a little overview of what it is. Basically, there was a ring of people, a marriage ring, that was just obviously shut down and exposed, in which they were targeting military members to then marry honeypots, Chinese women, and marry them and then make them citizens. And then they were getting bonuses to be able to live on the military basis. So the Chinese women were the spies for the CCP, now married to American soldiers, now living on our military bases, so that those Chinese women could then take the information from our military bases and send them back to the CCP. Then, once they gained permanent residency, they divorced the guy and they got millions and millions of dollars in kickback bonuses from the CCP for doing that, because now they're a permanent resident. They can go marry somebody else and do the exact same thing. So they are the biggest existential threat to all of humanity, the United States, the entire world, and China needs to be put in check. They can never be trusted with anything. I'm not sure why President Trump would do anything with China other than destroy them economically.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, to think that these subplots are going on, and also how you're meant to navigate the blanket oversimplification of, if you are anti-China, that means that you're racist, when what you are saying is that they
guilty as charged. If they want to call me racist, being anti-Chinese, I'm not anti-Chinese, I'm anti-CCP. There's a big difference. I'm anti-Communist Party of China. I'm anti-People's Liberation Army. I'm anti, their bioweapons and Wuhan labs and all the people and all the engineers and all the educators and all the people that own all their software and their social media platforms and all that. I'm anti all of them. I'm not anti the actual people of China. So I think people need to understand that. But here's the other thing. What about the fact that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, and I can't remember who the other person was, but somebody else, I think it was Kim Jong-un, they were having a conversation on a hot mic, and they were literally talking about different things to where they're going to try to live to like 150 years old or possibly never die. And they're talking about using people's organs from the Uyghur Muslims and the Mulangang, I think it's called, Fulangong, and basically taking those people, those prisoners, and killing them and taking and harvesting their organs and giving it to the Chinese people and the Chinese elite and the CCP. It's pretty sick stuff. But this is how far this evil regime is willing to go for world domination, and people need to understand that.
And when you talk about that type of experimentation, then you can go back to the dark side of Nazi Germany. And there are, of course,
Sure.
people that are now trying to tell you that that Hitler was on the right side when he was trying to exterminate another race of people. All of this is just pure evil sickness that is just permeating around the world. And what it comes from lack. And at the same time, it's overlaid by this idea of immortality, that we're on the cusp of immortality. I remember saying 25 years ago that my children's children will be the first generation that will be immortal. And I feel like that I might still be on par with that if that's the way that we're headed. But I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the right thing, because if we believe that, Josh, now here I'm going to go out on one of these wings, and I hope that this is as much entertaining as it is informative. And the reason why, and when you reflect a lot and you do these things and you think about all these particular reasons, and we're going to get into the Epstein story soon, which is another big story for reflection. When you get onto the ET alien story, it has been argued that the grey aliens that we're kind of aware of, some say they exist, whatever, don't have any reproductive organs. But the reason that they argue that one argument is that they're actually humans from the future who've come back in time who are trying to fix their DNA. That's the argument, because there's no reproductive organs that are identifiable in the bodies that they've found. Right?
Sounds like liberal men.
Very true. But here's the point. If you become immortal, there is no need to reproduce, is there? Because you can't. Where are you going to put everyone unless you're able to get out there into space?
And that's what I was talking about. I mean, obviously the globalists, they want population control, right?
Yes.
They want to kill off as many people as possible so that they have more room to roam and have their toys and enjoy the planet and all that by themselves. But yet, on the flip side of that, there's an elite amount of these sick globalist pedophiles and weirdos that are working on trying to figure out ways to live indefinitely, or as you said, become immortals with medicine and organ harvesting and all these different things. But on the flip side of that, they also don't want to have a cure for cancer and diseases, because then they lose this, right? They lose the money. And so it's kind of a catch-22. So you want to be immortal, you want to be able to use illegal organ harvesting from your prisoners to put into your body so that you can live forever, but yet you don't want to cure cancer and things like that, or let those cures out that are already there, because you're afraid of losing money and losing power. So I think it's an internal struggle within globalism that they're dealing with right now. But quite frankly, we need to understand that all people that believe in globalism are evil. Because if you are an Australian and you believe that the rest of the world should be put first before Australia, then you've got issues. If you're an American and you believe that the rest of the world should be taken care of before America, you're our enemy. I'm sorry. It's plain and simple. Every single person in every single country should be a nationalist and want what's best for their country first before anyone else in the rest of the world. And it's that thought process that is evil that we now have to flip. And hopefully President Trump is doing that. That's why he is the leader of the free world. And as I've said before, isn't it interesting that it's easier for the President of the United States to completely flip the complete world order in favor of the United States in less than a year or around a year than it is to fight with the Democrats in Congress and get anything done?
Absolutely. Isn't it interesting that the globalists want immortality for those that are in their big club, as George Carlin put it, and they want death to anyone who is not, because they are an oxygen-breathing, useless eater deplorable, to quote from the mouths of various different operators in that space. And so again, what that then says is that we certainly weren't all created equal in their eyes. If anything, there is a two-tier system, and we're going to know that right now as we flip to Epstein. Josh, It's such a big story now that I am forming the opinion that I do not believe that we're going to get arrests directly out of Epstein, or if we do, we'll get a few, but we won't get everyone. But I am equally concerned and not concerned because I believe that the same names keep coming up across all crimes. I am going to show you in a moment a link that now links Epstein officially and Maxwell to 9/11, because I believe that COVID was the biggest crime ever committed against humanity, and I think that those culprits will then lead to 2020 election fraud, which will take down the US government, and I think that then the Epstein files are going to lead to 9/11, and that will take out, well, those that will be last, the bad actors, both within the CIA and within Mossad, and I believe either controls the other. I don't think it even matters, and that the bad guys are finally going to take out once and for all, and that leaves us to the pathway to the new world. And then if Trump wants to go and tell us about the aliens, so be it. We can get off planet and Musk can go do his work on Mars. But let's get into it. So here we go. Where am I going to start with you today? You know what? Let me just show you this. Josh, while we're doing it, before I get into that, I want you to tell me about the latest files, because Alex Jones is all over social media, and some people
He's in the files, by the way. His name showed up.
Go figure. But it could be an email about them, etc. But my point is, people are
there's
attacking.
Been about 300 names that were dropped today.
Yes.
And exactly as I predicted many, many, many months ago, I said, you're going to likely see 75% of the people that are in these files are going to be Democrats, and about 25% are going to be Republicans. I've been saying that for the longest time. Well, today we have now been validated, and that has been confirmed, because 75% of the people in the Epstein files are all on the left, and there's about 25% on the right. And you've got major names in there. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, Eric Swalwell, Gavin Newsom. I mean, all the people, Adam Schiff, all the people that you would think are in there. And it's all the Democrats and all the Biden family, like almost the complete Biden family. So it's unreal. But there's also some shocking people in there on the right as well. So it's... like I said, I knew that was going to be the case. Now, again, some of the names that are in there, like President Trump, like Kash Patel and things like that, it's because, Dan Bongino, it's because they were working on the files. It doesn't necessarily mean that they did anything or there are nefarious activities. That doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that all of these different people, Steve Bannon was all over it, but again, he was doing some type of documentary. Although he's been silent about it, he hasn't really explained or come out and said anything about it. You would think he would. But the majority of the people that were doing bad things were all Democrats for the most part.
Well, of course, Roger Stone is all over Steve Bannon at the moment. There is a war going on there.
Yeah.
I have seen there was one accusation against Roger Stone on Epstein Island. I don't need to get into too much of it. It's not verified, so it's just an interesting one that I remember reading about a few years ago, so it's neither here nor there. And that's the problem that we have now, is that, unfortunately, I'm going to have to quote the late, great Carl Sagan, who, when challenged on extraterrestrial information, he said, extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. And I go, well, no, they're not. They just need standard evidence, but they need to be looked at fairly. But he's probably right now that we're in the Epstein stuff, we're going to need more than just emails. We're going to need the videos, and we're going to need to know that those videos are authenticated, which is going to lead me to where I always go and say that the only person I think on planet Earth that can get you the videos independently when he needs to save his own backside will be Bibi Netanyahu, who will have access to Mossad files. However, he is a mortal enemy of Ehud Barak, who features prominently, the former also Israeli Prime Minister, in the Epstein files. So, Josh, let's start this presentation with this video that you sent me that we've seen that makes us both feel ill. Apologies in advance. It's 30 seconds.
Most of us feel discomfort when we think about pedophiles. But just like pedophiles, we are not responsible for our feelings. We do not choose them. But we are responsible for our actions. And we must make a decision. It is in our responsibility to reflect and to overcome our negative feelings about pedophiles and to treat them with the same respect we treat other people with. We should accept that pedophiles are people.
Ugh.
How about that? That is just obscene.
Disgusting.
But look at this, Josh. I'm going to show you what I found today. There was an article that popped up with this headline. There's your security going off. You might have an intruder. Look at this. This is an article I found on Al Jazeera. Epstein sought help of ex-Russian official links to the FSB, according to files. Officials with links to Russia spy agency collected information on women to pass on to Epstein, right? So, whatever. But look at what I found within the article. The bottom paragraph there, Epstein told Bialykov that he liked the idea, which not specified in the emails, but that he should get a good English-speaking editor before sharing business proposals, and there were plenty of pretty women who could fill the role. Now, did that girl fill the role of the pretty woman justifying pedophilia? See how they operate?
Yeah, it's really disgusting. Look, I've said this before, and I've showed it on my show as way back in 1972 at the Democratic National Convention. In their platform, anybody can look this up, they literally say in their platform that pedophilia should be categorized as a sexual orientation and accepted. So these pedophiles, these globalist pedophiles, have been thinking about this and have been doing this for many years. They don't see someone who is interested in children as a bad person, as this woman said, that they're people too. And so then what happens is academia then takes this information and says, oh yeah, let's soften the image, right? Then you have these disgusting, abhorrent, evil, sadistic groups like NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. How sick is that? And then, more importantly, in the last like 15 to 20 years, you have this new movement that has popped up called MAPS, which is Minor Attracted Persons. And so what they're doing over time is they're trying to get the culture in the West, in particular, to accept the fact that they like to F children, which is absolutely sick and evil and twisted. And they want to make it an orientation. So here's the part where anyone listening to this around the world, you may not like to hear this, but the LGBTQ community must add the P at the end of that, because it is and has always been predicated upon supporting pedophilia.
I made the observation that it took 30 years to get marriage equality and 30 seconds for the trans agenda to emerge. It was that fast by comparison. And I also argued at the time that it appeared that the urgency was based on the fact that Pizzagate had broken, and what they were trying to do was to legitimize the trans because it allowed them to bring sexuality backwards to 3-year-olds who identified as a tomboy, and therefore they wanted to tell them that they were actually in the wrong body. So the perpetrator is actually the person convincing an innocent child, where tomboys have been around forever, right? They've been written up in literature. Let's look at Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird, for goodness sake, as one classic character. And of course it goes on forever and ever, and every family's got a tomboy. Goodness me, my mum used to say she was a tomboy. That's what she wanted to do because she hated playing cowboys and Indians with her brother and always having to be the Indian that got shot. That was just what they did back in the day. And I can't even say that anymore because that's bad. I guess they're going to ban all the John Wayne movies. But that was the point.
Probably.
That was the whole point of it. Now, the trans agenda, as we know, has gone off, and now it's being resoundingly defeated by President Trump. And Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, is writing some amazing stuff, and every day on his Facebook page or Twitter page, he's bringing out more and more information. There's another one I shared just the other day on Facebook. Now, if that's the case, and the rush to legitimise the trans movement. Now, here's another funny one, and I'm probably speaking out of school again, but years ago I worked in television, in commercial TV, and we had a fellow who was a member of the G community. And he was always very out there and outspoken and very, very funny and very, very popular at the same time. And he said to me, and he said it publicly in a room, he said, here's the thing, in the LGBT community that we're all lumped into, he said, the G's and the L's, we don't get on. We don't like each other. But here's the thing, both the G's and the L's, we don't like the T's combined. How about them apples, he would say to us. He said this idea of trying to force us all into one thing is not on. And this man was as flamboyant as anyone, participated in all sorts of Mardi Gras and things and all the stuff, was happy to go along with all of it, but he said it's not the same thing. And he said within that community, no one likes the P's, right? And they've been lumped in, and then you get this stuff that's trying to manufacture social norms that don't exist. And there it lies. And it stands to reason that G's and L's wouldn't have to like each other. Well, certainly not from a connection point of view, but they wouldn't. Where's the connection there? You just share a similar thing that you like your own sex, but you don't like the other sex. So go figure. It doesn't make any sense. Now, whether or not that's going to be construed one way or another, it's reporting on what people have said to me directly that other people can verify. But when we align where we are now, we all agree that these are crimes against children and they're horrific. So, Josh, what I found interesting was last week, I think I talked about it, there was this story that popped up, or I published it on my Facebook page, about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's ex stuns with a bizarre spray about the Epstein files. Her name is Victoria Harvey. Let me show you this clip and I'll come back.
You know, the thing is, what people can see from these Epstein files, he knew everybody that was very powerful. So, like, if you were on the scene and you were powerful, like, to be honest, like, if you're not in those files, it would be an insult. Because it just means that you were a bit of a loser.
Lady Victoria Harvey, former girlfriend of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's. That's an astonishing attitude, isn't it? If you're not in the Epstein files, it's an insult, you're a loser.
Damn. That's shocking. I mean, it's not shocking because, again, if you're in those files and you've done nefarious things, then you're probably a globalist and you're probably part of the cabal of the upper echelon of globalists and leaders and think tank people and all that. And you're probably a sick pedophile like the rest of them. If you
were like have that attitude, which was basically keeping up with the Joneses, and before the arrival of President Trump, you didn't know you were a globalist because there was no such thing as globalist versus nationalist. There was just the prevailing winds of world power. And if you didn't follow Alex Jones, who's been talking about globalism for a long time, and you dismissed him, you wouldn't have ever heard of the term apart from perhaps globalism from a more general sense. It was just the prevailing winds of world power all seeming to arrive at this point. But now we have an enemy, right? Because it's globalism versus nationalism, and we know the difference, and we know of our own country's sovereignty, and we know that we want to be Australian or American or English or whatever it is, or Canadian. It seems to be in the West, right? It doesn't seem to bother in third world countries, the global South, whatever you want to call them.
No, they usually kill them.
There you go. Isn't that interesting that we're following this, right? This is the way that we're observing what's really happening here in real time. So, Victoria Harvey made those comments, but she also made a number of other comments that I want to share with you now. Now, here she is. So you know what she's all about is that she thinks she's pretty special, a good-looking woman. I would argue in some of the video pictures doesn't look like that anymore. But Prince Andrew thought she was okay for a little while. Harvey reportedly claimed on social media, hearing from reliable sources, it is thought that the FBI went to her recently with evidence proof that she lied with recordings. She admits nothing ever happened with Prince Andrew. She's talking about Virginia Giuffre. She conveniently dying to evade jail. That's what Victoria Harvey said about Virginia Giuffre. The following month after she died by suicide, some people of course doubting that, the woman who does not deserve to be genuinely considered a lady, that's the author of this article in the Daily Telegraph, Daniela Elza, shared a screenshot of the news with the caption, "What lies catches up with you, there's no way out." So she is attacking directly this lady, Virginia Giuffre, who we saw this other picture on the right shortly before she then dies from suicide, allegedly or officially at least.
Yeah, a bus just happened to hit her and run her over, sure.
Now, people have been in that bus crash and they do claim that it wasn't nearly as bad when the bus clipped her car, etc. And so it's still a very grey area. But the fact is, Virginia Giuffre...
Even her own father said she didn't kill herself.
Okay, Virginia Giuffre's father, though, has sexually abused her daughter, and that's in her book, so he's bad news. Now, when you think of sex trafficking, you think of a 12-year-old that's been kidnapped, chained in a cage. This is not the same thing. These girls were living the high life. This is Victoria Harvey. In 2022, Harvey went on social media to prove via visibly half-naked digital Sherlocky infamous photo. She's claiming that the photo there with Andrew and Giuffre is fake. I'm going to take you to the bottom now. Have a look at this underneath the picture. Sorry, that's not the one. That's talking about days to live and saying that the payment there forked out $22 million to settle with Giuffre. Andrew denied it always. Harvey popped up to say the figure was nonsense. Here's where I'm going, Josh. Now, when they interviewed Harvey in September last year, now moved to Florida and converted to the Church of MAGA, apparently, that means that she's trying to save her backside if she's trying to align now with Trump. She said she described Andrew's part in things as a massive injustice. Of Giuffre, she said they fell for her stuff. Of Epstein's victims, a lot of them, most of them, I found out, just jumped on the bandwagon to get money. Well, that could support Pam Bondi turning her head the other day in the courtroom when those women stood up, brought up by, what's her name, Pramila Chaparral, whatever her name is.
Who's also in the files, by the way.
Exactly. Now, such was her belief in Andrew's innocence, she revealed she had posed as a prospective buyer of Maxwell's Belgravia house, which is in London, to prove the shot was not legit, taking a tape measure to supposedly measure up for carpets. I put on a wig and sunglasses, took along a photographer friend, and we had a good look around. We actually went in there twice. We measured everything, and honestly, you simply can't fit those bodies in that space. The landing is just too small. This one with Andrew is a composite photo. The scale's all wrong. So that's how far Victoria Harvey is going to defend Andrew, but somehow move to Florida to join MAGA. All right.
Doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Not to mention, if you remember with Andrew, and he did that train wreck of an interview with the BBC.
Yep.
And she showed the pictures, and if I remember correctly, he said something like, well, that's not me, and then she shows the picture, and she says, well, is that not you with your arm around Virginia Roberts? He goes, well, of course it is. Remember? And then so he admits it. So that kind of kills her argument. And then, of course, he said something like, oh, he doesn't sweat or something like that. And he was going to his daughter's birthday party. But we now know that all of that wasn't true. So, look, Prince Andrew was absolutely one of, if not the number 3. I mean, you've got Epstein, you've got Maxwell, and you've got him. Like Prince Andrew and maybe Bill Clinton. I mean, like they were like 3 and 4 right there. So this was like the good old boys club. They were doing horrific things to these poor innocent victims, and yeah, I'm sure they were giving them money, but probably just to keep them quiet and maybe to pay for their medical bills when they're abusing them. Who knows what was going on? I mean, some of these files are really graphic. They're really sick and twisted. And it's just sad that so many of these women were, sexually abused by these people, by these, again, elites.
And we see the same injuries consistently with bleeding in horrible places, etc., and trips to hospitals or not in certain circumstances. And there were a number of very, very powerful people that have been named in the files, which we don't have to get into here. They're all over the internet. What we're covering is stuff that you would not be aware of, and the reasons why we're following pathways and lines. And Josh and I don't agree on this Victoria Harvey story, but now I'm going to thicken the plot for you a little bit. Look at this. This is in an article, right, that has been a Substack article over another article here. Prince Andrew's ex-lady, Victoria Harvey, believes Jeffrey Epstein had a role in 9/11. Look at this. A 2022 Instagram post by Harvey says, regarding 9/11, which I'll touch more on tomorrow, 4 years ago, I have a story that connects it to Epstein, as in he knew it was going to happen, and so did his close circle. They even bought plane tickets as souvenirs and never got on the planes. This is a whole new level of sick. She then deleted the post afterwards to avoid attention. Now, if that is the case... She
sounds like an attention getter.
If that is the case, let's now go here. This is an email that came out of the files. Look at this. Same story written by Richard Gage. I'll read it backwards. any interest in being on the Shadow Commission on 9/11. The membership list is secret. Rough cut at edwardjepstein.com. Let me know. Regards, Ed Epstein. That is no relation to Jeffrey Epstein, but that is written to Ghislaine Maxwell, who we know her email was gmax. Her reply, thanks for the invite. Unfortunately, I cannot be on the Shadow Commission. Back in January of 2003, 15 months after 9/11. So Harvey's claiming that Epstein knew about it, they bought tickets, etc. Ghislaine Maxwell is asked to go on a secret Shadow Commission for 9/11. All right, Jason, what else have you got? Well, this is Richard Gage, the 9/11 architect who I interviewed on TNT Radio. He's everywhere and he's been at this. And poor old Richard Gage, with everything that's going on right now, 9/11's been pushed to the back. I maintain another story or another argument that 9/11 truth is clearly connected to the culprits and the foreknowledge. Now, what's ugly about 9/11 is that the trade towers were recently, the Westfield was built underneath, which was at the time Australia's Frank Lowy bought Westfield underneath the trade centre shortly before 9/11 happened. And of course, Larry Silverstein had insured both buildings, got massive payouts with a cheque written by George W. Bush himself to pay him out after the buildings collapsed. That is unusual and very quick and very neat. What else can I show you? Here's an interesting one. Former New York City Mayor Giuliani planned to meet Epstein at his house in 2010. This is after his conviction. There's the email written to Jeffrey Epstein, subject of Giuliani, not written by Giuliani, but by somebody called Bill. I've already called Maureen. She has a meeting with Mr. Giuliani and said she will call me back. I spoke to Rudy and he said he'd be happy to meet with Jeff and is in town next Tuesday and Thursday. Call Maureen, his assistant, to make an appointment. That's all we've got. Let's move on. Number 2. 9/11 Commission member Bob Kerrey met with Epstein many times. Former Senator Bob Kerrey, a member of the 9/11 Commission, met with Epstein and other public figures, including former Israel Prime Minister Ehud Barak in 13 and 14. This is 11 years, sorry, what are we now, 12 years after 9/11. As of this story's publication, none of the documents we've reviewed indicate that Kerrey was involved in Epstein's sex trafficking organisation. He writes, this is the assistant to Epstein writing to Bob Kerrey. Jeffrey's having a meeting with Peter Thiel and possibly Bill Burns for lunch at his home in New York on Saturday. Jeffrey's asking if you might be available to join us. Here we go. Here's another one. However, Kerrey provided a cryptic response when our colleagues at We Are Change approached him after the speech he gave in 2009. When asked about the need for a criminal investigation for 9/11, Kerrey called the terror attacks a 30-year-old conspiracy and then ran off. So somebody on the 9/11 Commission calls it a conspiracy, but he's having or being asked to be arranged with meetings with Epstein, who Harvey says may have prior knowledge. Now, last week, Josh, Howard Lutnick, Trade Secretary, was forced to explain why he met with Epstein. Now, this from the same article. Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, not Trade Secretary, who oversees NIST, and former CEO of the World Trade Center North Tower tenant, Cantor Fitzgerald, had a much closer relationship with Epstein that he led on. Released emails show that Lutnick brought his children to Epstein's private island in 12 and had lunch with him, years after publicly claiming he ended all personal contact with him. Lutnick's home is located at 11 East 71st Street in Manhattan, next door to Epstein's mansion at 9 East 71st Street, and he bought the home from Epstein's trust. Now, we are landing at St. Thomas early Saturday afternoon and planning to head over to St. Bart's on Monday at this point. This is Hi Jeff. We are located, what is exactly your location of my captain? Does Sunday evening sound good? Blah, 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 blah. Now, this is also very important facts. Cantor Fitzgerald was a major tenant of the World Trade Center, lost 658 employees on 9/11. Lutnick claimed, according to Gage, he survived because he arrived late to work, well, would arrive late, never got there, that day because he wanted to take his son to his first day of kindergarten. Lutnick currently oversees NIST, which published fraudulent scientific reports about the 3 skyscrapers' collapses because NIST falls within the Department of Commerce. We've currently FOIA request to NIST to release their computer data input for World Trade Center 7, which is Gage's all over. Lutnick has been forced NIST to release the information, has the power to force, but NIST claims could jeopardise public safety would they be released. So, I have an opinion. I've presented it to you, Josh. You're welcome to let me know what you think about all of that. But what do you say?
Well, I know that Howard Lutnick was, pressed on this a little bit more, and he said that he, quote, caught a ride to where he was going or something, and Epstein offered him a ride. Now, I'm not saying that there's not more to the relationship, because quite frankly, there probably is. As far as Epstein being part of 9/11, and then knowing that Howard Lutnick lost not only his brother, but 3/4 of the entire workforce in the Cantor Fitzgerald building there on whatever floor it was, it seems a little odd that he would have a relationship with someone that might have been part of the attack that killed his brother and 3/4 of the people that work for him. So I can't really kind of put those two together. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know at this point. I think that, like I said, there's a lot. This is backfiring more on Democrats than it is Republicans. As I said before, 75% of the people in these files are on the left. And I did say 25% or so is going to be from the right. And so you can look at the whole thing and say, look, this is Washington. And that's why, and I agree with you, that no one's going to really have any heads roll, because the people that would be investigating and in charge of taking these people down are also part of it. So you're not going to have these people being held accountable, in my opinion, because the whole entire Washington, the entire Democrat Party would completely be dissolved if they were to arrest everybody involved. I mean, literally, you'd wipe out 75% of the people in all of Washington and 25% of the people in Washington on the Republican side. So I just don't see, it's like one of those things where the people that need to be taken down, they're being investigated by people that are also in these files.
Well, I have an opinion on all of this, and I think that where I'm going supports what I've been saying all along. Now, what I find fascinating is Howard Lutnick only gets the job as Secretary of Commerce because Trump appoints him, and that gives him the power over NIST. Now, just like if you wanted to take on the culprits of COVID, the number one human being that you would want in that position in this parts of health would be Bobby Kennedy. And you couldn't pick anyone else outside of Kennedy to get into that space. He knows Fauci intimately. He knows what really went on. He 100% is an alternate health advocate, and he's obviously demonstrated that right now. But it also depends on timing. Now, Trump, for all of his faults or criticisms or whatever, is a master thick-skin operator, and he also knows everyone. And he is a master at playing the Godfather, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And Lutnick, the same way. Now, if you believe in two things, one, that JFK Jr. himself always wanted to avenge the murder of his father and was involved in bringing that to the surface, and Trump and JFK Jr. were great mates, and that maybe that was the reason that they were scared for him to get into the Senate back in the day, and that's where that whole plane crash and Hillary and all that ties into. And if you also accept the Q post that says saving Israel for last for a very specific reason, why would you let Israel do what it's doing out there in the world, which they would argue is getting rid of terrorism and cleaning up the democratic pathway into the Middle East, and then prepare to take them down? In other words, you've got to use your enemies in order to get to where you're going to go, and then expose them as you go. My argument is that email with Giuliani was that he was obviously waiting for an invitation for Epstein, and whether or not that happened or not, and certainly would be well aware that he was a convicted offender at that point. What he's doing is he knows who the spies are, and the intelligence of the Giulianis, being the lawyer that brought down the New York crime families, he's going in there to investigate. That man is a lawyer and investigator. He's not going in there asking for Epstein for favors. He's looking for clues. Howard Lutnick,
yeah. More than
658 employees dead. That's more than a quarter of everyone who died on 9/11 that day, including his brother. Now, that's a man whose entire life has been destroyed, but he has been saved by an act of God one way or another. Now, the anti-Israeli set will say that he knew about it, and I say no effing way that he did, because he wouldn't have let his brother do it, and he wouldn't have sacrificed 657 other employees.
Correct.
No way in the world that that happens. He has been the useful idiot in it, and therefore he spends the rest of his life dedicated to one day working out. The fact that Trump picks him to be the Secretary of Commerce, that puts him in front of the NIST, means that these people are panicking. The fact that we now know that he was mixing with Epstein says that he is looking for information and little clues to know that if he needs to strike when the iron is hot, or however that is going to play out. And so, in order to get close, you have to go undercover, which is what all police work is these days, to take people out. I maintain Trump, the informant, which we already know, and the mole who got in there, these people are acting undercover in order to take them out. Now, once again, you and I agree that Ehud Barak is bad news, and we know that he was great mates with Epstein and did horrible things. And another thing that we've learnt this week, Josh, is that Thorbjørn, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Thorbjørn Jagland, the former Norwegian Prime Minister, is now, it was reported by BBC, was charged, but under investigation for corruption involving his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the guy, former Norwegian PM, that became the head of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, and I have covered on my previous shows that it was that man, that Jeffrey Epstein, via Bill Gates, asking Epstein to get in touch with Jagland because Gates wanted the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's the reason why he was friends with Epstein, because he knew that Epstein and Jagland were great mates and working together, and they all met in Norway for a meeting that's been reported in the New York Times, and I've covered that off in previous shows that I have done. So there you get to see how it all works. The plot thickens. But isn't it interesting that Jeffrey Epstein's name comes up in everything? There was the COVID stuff that came up with vaccines with Gates. It comes up now with Nobel Peace Prizes, and it comes up now in 9/11. All of this pure evil, which of course, if he is a spy for Mossad and CIA, the pure evil comes from within. And that doesn't mean that you destroy the nation state of Israel or the nation state of the USA, but you clean out the bad guys that are within. I find it mind-blowing, and I always said it will take something unique to open this up, and I wonder if Victoria Harvey's big mouth is the one that's going to finally open up this can of worms once and for all. I am absolutely enthused. I don't think we've had a bigger leap forward in all of the last 10 or 12 years of fighting this war than what we've had in today's show. I think it's an absolute ripper.
I think we've covered a lot. We've discussed a lot of different scenarios. Some of them are conspiratorial in nature, but that's okay. I always say, always ask questions. If you're not asking questions, then you're not moving forward. So I've always said that. I learned that from the late, great Barry Farber. He would end every broadcast with keep asking questions. And so there's nothing wrong with asking questions and trying to put the dots together and putting the focus on where it should be. And who knows, maybe some of these people like Giuliani and Lutnick and the rest of them were trying to bring down the globalist cabal from inside. I mean, you know, sometimes you have to infiltrate, right, in order to get into an organization, pretend that you're one of them in order to try to take something down. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But I think a lot of the leaders that we've been talking about, that some of them are even in these files, I think they're in these files because they're touching these files, because they're the people that are part of getting these files out. So I don't necessarily think like people like Kash Patel and some others, or Dan Bongino for that matter, are like in the files as far as like being in the files. I think it's more like because they're touching them, because they're preparing them and things like that, their names are there. But I do think that there are a lot of these globalist pedophiles that are in these files. And like I said before, I think a lot of people that are quote unquote investigating these things aren't going to bring charges because they're part of it. And so you have a cabal, a globalist cabal, and it's interesting that this one Jewish guy from New York is really at the center of all of it. So in other words, he's been able to blackmail world leaders, politicians, globalists, sports figures, actors, actresses. I mean, he's been able to kind of coalesce all of these different intricate pieces and basically be the ringleader of the globalist cabal of pedophiles. And that's why they had to eliminate him. There was no way they could allow even half of what's happening right now come out in trial. And so that's why they killed him. There's no question in my mind.
It's absolutely extraordinary. So the argument, therefore, that Epstein may still be alive, I find that quite difficult. But at the same time, those and there's more and more people that keep saying it every day, but no one brings up, well, if he is alive, who was on the gurney, or are you
exactly?
That doesn't make it. I'm the only one that brought that up, right?
Yeah.
There it is.
Exactly.
And so fascinating just the same. Well, I hope you've enjoyed what's gone on today. Very much a rowdy radio show debate. I don't think there's much better that I've seen out there online. You tell us what you think below, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to change, or who you think is wrong, right, or full of nonsense, hot air and the rest of it. But we gave our all today for 75 minutes, and I hope that you really enjoyed what you got. Please check out jbushow.substack.com, and of course, channel51.com.au is where you are probably watching this, if not on one of the social media sites. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you for taking part.
God bless.